Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Sunletter, the host of How to Fight CPS and Win, the New York edition. I have today a special guest, a very special guest, Shauna. And in her past, she had to make a very, very difficult decision having 5 children, and her attempts to keep them safe were failed by the system. But she does have a nice outcome ultimately, still in contact with her kids who appear to be thriving. So without further notice, I'd like to introduce Shauna. And Shauna, if you'd like to say a little bit about yourself and how your story started.
Yes, it's a long, complicated case, but it started in 2015 when I found out our oldest had been abusing the younger kids. I only had 4 kids. We got them out of the house. We did everything that was necessary to keep them safe and get the proper help. And we got the oldest out of the house because CPS wanted him to stay in the house. And after seeing how the younger kids were scared, I said he needs to get out. I'm not taking that chance. So we had a family friend that was willing to take him in. We kept him away from the kids. So further down the line, the it was not the baby, but the youngest at that the next to the youngest, he was, I believe, 6 at the time. He had informed us that because he's autistic, so he didn't have a lot of ability to speak like a normal child, but he was able to share that he was being abused, and I had to ask questions that were not leading. And so I called during my counseling session, and so that we were doing it together so that we could get the help that the kids need. They talked to the kids. They believed the older ones who said they didn't do it, which I understand why the kids would say it, because after seeing, you know, their older brother get in trouble and that kind of thing, they didn't understand that they weren't monsters. They were repeating a pattern. So after that, the CPS had threatened that after I asked about respite so I can get the help the kids need, because they pretty much just ignored my requests for help. They said that if they took them, they would take all of them and then charge me with neglect. So we didn't really know how much more to keep them safe because they weren't supposed to be alone together in a room. So we gave up our 2 younger boys who were 6 and 2.5 at that time, and gave them up for open adoption so that we could keep them safe, um, which was a really hard decision. And we have a lot of contact. I get to talk to them. I never miss a birthday or a holiday. I can gradually just send them something in the summer. Uh, I So after that, it was in the beginning, at the end of 2018, when I found out what happened. So the next year, my daughter started feeling guilty for what she did, and so she came clean. She told on her brother, and then he violent because he didn't really explain anything. And part of it was me bear hugging him because I was trying to get him to calm down from throwing stuff, and I didn't know that was a trigger. So I called the police, and CPS was called, obviously, and they basically what was going on, that the pound, so they claimed all these extra charges, saying that I didn't have internet for homeschooling, which I did, and I had proof of it, saying that um, said a lot. Saying that I was starving our children, and I had proof that the medicine was causing their weight loss, and that my husband's genes was was within my children because
I'm listening.
and so they were involved, and they've been involved since the end of that.
Uh-huh. So you went to the system for help.
Yes, because they needed it.
And did they help you?
No, I thought when CPS entered, even though the police informed them, which I was going to call them anyways, because of the what our daughter had shared, because I had to call the police from the violent outburst from my son. Um, I had to. I was hoping, yeah, this will get my kids help that they need. Everything should be fine, and it was.
So your initial goal was to keep your family intact,
Yes.
but you found no support.
No.
And they called your children basically liars?
Basically, the 6-year-old they call a liar because they believe the older children who said they didn't do it.
But wouldn't you expect it normal for an older child to say they didn't do it even if they did?
Yeah,
And at 6, don't you think child is credible?
I would think so. I mean, you're supposed to believe your children when they tell you things like that.
And how else would a 6-year-old know about anything to describe?
Exactly.
So you did this whole thing. You gave your children to a friend in an open situation so you could keep them safe because the system failed you and failed to provide services and therapy for an older child with sexually reactive type behaviors.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad enough for a child to be victimized by a sibling, but then to have your whole family tore up too. I mean, that's got to be trauma on top of trauma.
Yeah, I mean, the kids, we're when we had counseling, we had explained to them, we still love them no matter what, even though they were still denying it after foster care, because we wanted them to know that they weren't bad, they were repeating a pattern, and we are trying to stop. Because my children have a younger mentality than what their age is at that time, and so it was just a really, I just. I just didn't know what to make out of it. I wanted help. I wanted our family to be intact. I wanted them to be able to help the children to heal, and they can't heal if everybody's still in there, and I can't.
This to me, because my son had sexually reactive behaviors since the age of 6 or 7, and also became violent as well. And indeed, the system continued to fail to respond to his behaviors, intervene, mitigate, give him therapy. Um, and in fact, he's placed in custody of the parent who he alleged sexually abused him. And they kept him there with his other siblings. So, now that he's older, he now got arrested for sending sexually explicit images to another child. So, in a sense, perhaps what you did was heroic because you cared to intervene, even though the system wasn't helping. So, I guess in a sense, maybe I'm your, what is it, the ghost of Christmas future or something to show you what could have happened if you didn't do this to protect your children and mitigate, get them help, and get them therapy. But this other topic kind of came up in conversation recently because when children are victimized, they can respond in varied ways. And sometimes they don't even have behaviors that corroborate, abuse at all. Sometimes they act and fit right in and you would never suspect a thing. Sometimes they're abnormally compliant. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Whatever you want. Sometimes they get Stockholm or what we call traumatic bond and they bond with their abuser. Um, Sometimes they have other behaviors, sometimes they have runaway behavior, sometimes they repeat what happened to them because that's their way of expressing that they think is normal. But one thing that also happens when children are abused is they mimic the same behaviors, like you call it, repeating patterns. And it is, repeating patterns because a lot of times when kids exhibit sexualized behaviors from their victimization, they are not offenders. They don't have the brain of an offender. They're just doing what is normal to them because it's what's happening to them. And sometimes the system makes mistakes and or just others, and they start to think that these kids with these behavior issues are offenders. But one thing we also know, if you don't intervene and you don't mitigate these behaviors, sometimes they can go on to adulthood if all these behaviors are left unattended and become offenders. So one thing that bothers me is when people act like what that child did was wrong. And I think that you come across as a very loving mother and understanding of your child and your child's behaviors as well. And I want to commend you for that because I think people need to remember that whatever a child's response is to their abuse, They're not the ones that did anything wrong. They're not perpetrators. They didn't do anything wrong. Their behaviors as a result of their victimization is the fault of their perpetrator. We always have to remember to keep the blame, the shame where it belongs, and it's never on the children. It's on the abuser. Do you know if your son was victimized, or do you know who did it, or what were the circumstances at the time?
When we talked to the oldest, when he had spoken to the police, he said he didn't remember anything, but he ever doing anything, that he thinks it was curiosity. But like I said, if he was little, if somebody did it to him, he may not remember everything. But I just, you know, I don't think a child's going to repeat those kind of things unless it was done to him.
Right.
Because have those kind of movies sitting around. We didn't watch that stuff. We didn't do things in front of our children. So the only way that he would know anything is if something happened to him.
So plan A was to try and keep your family intact and
Yeah.
get services for all the siblings, really, because the ones offending need help and the ones that were offended on need help. Safety measures around the house, safety plans around the house. And you were looking forward to people supporting you in that sort of a response, but that's not what you got. You got someone threatening to take all the kids away.
Yes. And unfortunately, in some ways, it was being what's that word? Discriminated against because she's a member of our church, that she doesn't like the members. She's still considered a member, but she's like she doesn't come or anything. And so she was there with the investigator who took away my children, and then she bragged about missionaries that came to stop at her house.
One of the things that I also think is important, though, is your home should be your sanctuary.
Yeah.
It should be your safe place. And if your home isn't a safe place, hopefully, like you said, hopefully your church is your safe place, or even for kids that their school is their safe place. But somewhere you're where you spend the majority of your time, you need to have a safe place, and preferably it's your home. But when it can't be your home, hopefully it's one of these other places, right? But when there's this problem with older children offending on younger children in the same home, sometimes I think, despite all the safety measures put into place, the kids that were victimized by a sibling never really do get the chance to feel safe in their home. How did you feel about addressing that?
Well, while they were gone, because I know that this house probably had some bad memories in it for them, that after they were removed, we redid the whole entire inside of the house. Like we cleaned everything, went through everything that we owned, re-wallpapered, repainted, and redecorated some of the rooms so that when they came back, even for a visit, that was like a new home for them, and they really enjoyed that.
What do you think that CPS and the police should have done for you? What were you expecting? I know you wanted, intervention, but are there programs that you were already aware of? Did you do some research? What were you thinking would happen?
I thought that they would at least help us with services. I didn't think that they would lie and put charges against us that weren't even accurate. I expected them to be honest and tell the truth and help, and that's not what happened.
They kind of flipped the narrative.
Yeah, and it was hurtful, not just with that, but seeing my kids suffer even more in foster care. Um, and then even though I was telling them what the foster parents was doing, they were ignoring the child advocacy center counselor as well. So they knew that he was being abused, and they had bruises. He had bruises on his arms, and he reacted once, and they removed him and put him elsewhere. And then when he reacted in the other home because of triggers and stuff, they put him right back into the abusive home. The supervisor at the visitor center said that sometimes they will change the reports. They changed the report saying, instead of that he had bruises from, the foster parent, that it said that he had bruises from a dog bite, and you can tell that they were finger marks.
So I thought you found a friend of the family to send the kids to, but this was
No,
not?
the friend of the family was the person that my oldest son went to. The two younger ones, I found adoptive parents of the same faith that we have that, would be willing to take them in. And Angel and Jason were the two middle kids that were repeating the behaviors. They went into foster care.
Okay. So the ones that with the behaviors went into foster care. The
Yeah.
younger ones went into care of a friend with the same faith.
No, yeah. They were like
I'm so
friends.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I know it's confusing. We found adoptive foster parents for the two younger boys to go to that were of the same faith as us. Um, but that we didn't really know them that well, but we made sure it was the right decision before we just say, "Hey, you can have our kids." It was a very thorough planning and making sure that we felt comfortable with them, and I couldn't have asked for better adoptive parents for them.
So the two younger ones, why did you relinquish them to the adoptive parents?
Because it was the first time when CPS wasn't listening to me that they were being inappropriately touched. They believed the older kids when they said they didn't do it.
Okay.
Well,
So that you gave them away, and then you kept the older two with the middle two with the sexualized behaviors initially, and then you still gave them up later to the
uh,
foster system?
no, the I had no choice. They just removed the two middle kids for foster care. I didn't have a choice in that. But I gave the two younger boys up before um, CPS had anything to say about, coming.
Them. So in other words, what you're telling me is this is crazy. You're telling me that they came into your home and they were threatening to take all your kids away, so you gave some of them to friends before they could take all your kids?
Yeah, but they weren't investigating us at that time to give the two younger boys up for adoption. They had closed that case, and my husband and I wanted to keep the boys safe because we can't leave alarm because we can't leave the kids alone with one another because of safety precautions. So we wanted to make sure that they felt safe and they were physically safe as well. So we gave them up for open adoption. And then later on, our daughter, like I had said, she felt guilty for what she had done. And then when she told on her brother, he got mad. And so he was getting violent. And I had to call the police. And
Gotcha.
that's,
So it was a later time that they went.
yes. You could tell they were not happy that they couldn't take the other two. But I think in a spiritual manner that I was able to keep them safe from foster care because that's where they would have went.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. There's, and that's what it is. Your kids went into care of strangers. There's I always go back to this. This didn't apply to my case, but I know about the Family First Act from the year 2018. And that's that before CPS removes children, they are supposed to extinguish any suitable family member. And that is to include even like godparents, at least in the state of New York, godparents, even close friends of the family. But they always seem to want to nitpick and find something wrong with a suitable family member, or this excuse or that excuse, or manufacture this problem or that problem so that they can snatch the kids and put them into foster care. But foster care is really bad. There's a report by the US Department of State that was released in 2019 on human trafficking throughout the world. And what it found was in the United States is that foster care is the main source of where child sex trafficking comes from. And if you saw the recent movie, The Sound of Freedom, at the end of the movie, it says that child sex trafficking is a $150 billion industry a year, and United States is a main hub of child sex trafficking. So what's going on in our foster system and why CPS is snatching kids from our family without putting them with suitable family members first, including even close friends of the family, um, is not making sense, because the Family First Act of 2018 includes research that says children do better when maintained in their family. So these very, very, very difficult decisions you made seem to be right, but unfortunate that you had to do this and break up your family, but it seems like you did the most intelligent, most difficult thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad you still have contact. Now you have contact with all your kids?
Yes. I talked to my oldest when my other kids are not around because still I had to learn to separate that he's my son compared to what he did, but I don't let him around the other kids, of course. Sorry. And my the two middle kids from foster care, my son was permanently discharged in May, and my daughter permanently discharged um, on the 17th of this month. And um, my two younger kids, I still talk to.
So when you say discharged, then what?
That means they still come into the house for like a year for my son and less than 6 months for my daughter because she'll be 18 in January. It felt like they gave them back because, um, they're almost 18 because my husband paid the child support. Um, and he makes, I mean, I don't want this to sound like I'm bragging, but I mean, he makes good money. And because they try to get kids as well who with parents who can make money because it doesn't even go all to the kids, it goes to the state because we're still paying child support even though they're home.
Weird. Can you
It,
say that again?
we are paying child support even though they are still at home.
How does that work?
I don't know. They said, well, last year when my daughter was home for a little bit for child discharge, they said, well, not every kid gets to go home, but the money doesn't even go to them; it goes to the state. And so when they took her out for because there were some issues. I mean, they accused me of leaving a bruise on her, but they didn't show me the picture. Nothing there. Like they said that I hit her with a shoe. She was throwing shoes at me. I threw them like away from her, but they wouldn't show me any pictures. I had proof that I didn't do anything to her, and so um, they said that they just filed the motion for my son since he is permanently discharged, but they you might get some of that back. But I mean, you still pay child support when they're home, and then you don't even get any of that back. Even if they take them right back out of the house, you don't get any of that, and the kids never see it.
What are the supposed fees for?
Um, I don't know. It's just like because they pull out his child support like every week. So even though she was home for 5 months, he didn't see any of that money from the child support, and neither did our daughter because that money could have gone for things that she needed.
How much are they taking, can I ask?
Part-
How much are they taking, can I ask?
right. At that time, it was 277 a week. They didn't tell us about arrears when we first started, like when they first took the kids. So they took almost half of his paycheck. It was $416 a week. Right now, because they told us that it was supposedly like 2 or 3 years that they've been removed, that they upped it $40 more. Now they're taking $316 a week out of his paycheck
But
for
the
child.
kids are older and they're back home?
Yes.
I haven't heard that one before. I'm stumped.
I can show you all the paperwork too if you need to see it. I'm still stuck too, and I tried to ask why. Why is this happening? Because if they're home, the money should go to them. We should at least have some of that money back so that we can take care of our kids. It just felt like they were finding a reason for not being able to support our kids so they could remove them. Well, that's how I felt. So it just didn't make sense. Why are you taking child support if they're home?
So when did they start coming back home?
Last year was between March and August. This time, my son has been home since January 31st. Angel has been home since June 14th, I believe, and they're still taking child support. And because I don't work, because I was always a house and homemaker, the stay-at-home mom, I have to pay $25 to $28 a month, and that comes right out of my husband's paycheck. So we didn't understand that either.
Did you ever talk to an attorney about this or see
They
what's
didn't
going on to end this?
really give me any answers. They don't really call me back very much, if at all.
So your older children went into the system, or the ones with the behaviors went into the system. They did get therapy, and
Yeah.
they're older now, and you see they seem to have a chance for a normal adulthood.
Yes, we have a lot of work to do because of all the trauma they've experienced in foster care.
Yeah. So they were supposedly abused while they were in foster care. Did
Yes.
they were they continually abused, or did it stop at some point?
Well, I guess he only put his hands on my son a couple of times, and he has told this to the counselors as well, and CPS still didn't do anything. He I would say they were more controlling than anything, and psychologically abusing them, which the counselor knows and had concerns and had shared it with the caseworker. Um, but and then the other foster home was fine until I realized that they weren't really in it for my daughter, and then they had given her another child's they gave her another child's prescription. Their daughter had joked her. She had shared with this with the OCO, the visitation center supervisor, and they still got unfounded. So I just didn't know how to help the kids anymore because it was like nothing I said made a difference, and it
Are you
seemed.
glad? Are you glad to have your kids back?
Yes, it's been a little rough with because of the runaway issues, the volatile situations that seems to arise here. But I know that even though it's hard for me to deal with those behaviors, I know a lot of it is from him just his experiences from being gone. And sometimes it's hard because I can only do so much to help them. They have to want to help themselves too. And unfortunately, he's just at that mindset that he doesn't want to listen to authority, and I know it really isn't having anything to do with me. It's more of what he's experienced.
It's very difficult as moms, because I know, because this just happened with my son. He got in trouble. It's very difficult as moms when that time comes where you know that they need to fall on their own and pick themselves up and figure themselves out, and to basically just have to sit and be patient through that. It's very difficult.
Because you can see that the reason why they are doing those behaviors is because they're hurting, and you don't know how to help them. You can only, like I said, only do so much.
And you get angry too because people failed, you know, they
Yeah,
failed them.
it does really upset me because it's like I lost my children, all of them in a way, because nobody wanted to do the right thing and help them. And you know, for a mom not being able to raise my younger boys in the way that I should be able to is really hard to deal with because, those were my last kids. I mean, I love all my kids, but it was, and then having to lose the other two because they had another agenda, and, having to see my kids suffer, not learning the things that they should have been able to learn while they were here. It's just,
Things
it's,
could have and should have gone a lot better.
so,
Yeah.
we have a lot of work ahead of us. But the last foster home my daughter was in was definitely a big improvement, and I've seen a big change in her that was for the positive, for the better, and she seems to progressing in the right direction. We're just working with our son right now to get him on the right path.
Well, I'm glad that you've had contact with your kids throughout all of this. That probably was very mitigating too for them and helpful, because a lot of times you hear stories where kids are taken from the parents and then the kids are lied to and they're told their parents don't love them, don't want them, and very harmful things when the child loved their parents and knew their parents loved them. So, you know, you made some very, very difficult decisions because people failed you, but it seems, like maybe if your kids have a chance for a normal adulthood, that maybe you did the right things, you know. Do you speak up about what happened in your case? Do you do anything online? Do you have a presence?
Yeah. I have a group on Facebook called Oswego County Corruption, and I wasn't gonna do anything like that at first because that's not me. Typically, I like to stay in my little bubble by myself, I guess. But there was a child who died under CPS care that should not have died. It was so bad that somebody should have noticed something. He was, uh, I believe he had cerebral palsy. He was so thin that his bones and the plates that he had were showing his hip bones and stuff. And um, like, well, they neglected him. I'm like, because sometimes I second guess myself. I'm like, is there something that I'm not seeing that maybe I did that I didn't realize? And it, because I kind of second guess myself all the time, and I'm like, you know what? They neglected us. And that's when I started to start defending the situation with Jordan Brooks, and then I started putting my case on there, and I I know I kind of left caseworkers who were in my case, but I also wanted to help people be able to share their stories and share the links like to the CPS manuals and different things like that, so that they can be more knowledgeable to help their own case, because not everybody knows what to do. And I was very naive to the system, thinking we were going to get help. I i had all this evidence to prove, hey, I didn't do this, and we were we were very wrong. uh, we didn't realize how much corruption was in our county to through it.
So, it's very hard to speak up, especially when you are more of a person that's introverted and you tend to stay in your own bubble. But how quickly CPS forgets that they are paid and funded by taxpayers, and that taxpayers have a right to know how our tax dollars are performing. And we have a right to know what our CPS is doing with our children. So, I thank you so much and commend your bravery. I think you're a hero. I think that, you made some very, very, very difficult decisions and they came from your heart. And hopefully you spared your children, because in my situation, my children didn't have the chance to be spared or for their behaviors to be mitigated and receive therapy. Um, so, it was plan B, not plan A, to keep your family intact and get services. Um, that was a huge, huge, difficult decision to make to save your kids. And I thank you for caring about other people's kids and coming forward with your story, working on the child situation that died. Um, because more and more people need to speak out, because if just one person speaks out, they can target you or me very easily. But if masses of people speak out and come forward with their stories, they're not going to be able to be in control. And we have the right to know what our agency is doing, because right now it doesn't look good.
Yeah, and I've noticed that since I was copying and pasting the links of the manuals that are online, the OCFS, I think that's what it's called, the Office of Children of Family and Services. They blocked me from my site, from my Google account. I can't even get in there. I have to go like incognito or a different. Um, sorry about. I had to decline a call. Um, I have to go in a different app or whatever to get on their site. I
Wow.
said I should record, like screen record me getting into, trying to get into it and being denied, and then record it trying to get, because he can get into it on his phone. So I'm like, I didn't think they're supposed to block you from that, but they blocked me from my Google account, that I can't print stuff off there anymore.
Wow.
I was really surprised. I was pretty mad too, but I still saved the links in my phone so that I can still print them off, and because I was using them for my own case as well, and I have them all saved in another blog that I have, because I'm like, well, they can block me all they want, but I still have everything that I had from before. So, uh,
What is your opinion of CPS in general? Because I know you're speaking out about your case and the other child's case, but I'm sure you hear of other people's as well.
well, I know that most of them are trained to do it things a certain way, but I know that there are a few good ones, but they don't stay very long because they don't want to be repeating. They don't want to be doing the same things that everybody else is doing because they know it's wrong. And some of the things I've heard in other CPS cases, it just breaks my heart because these are families who love their children. They don't want to, you know, they want to work on whatever is wrong, but that doesn't mean the children need to be removed at that point. I understand that there are kids that need to be removed that are seriously harmed, but kids get neglected and left to be abused, and that I just don't understand.
Isn't one of their isn't one of their mottos helping families?
Yeah, that's what they say. I haven't seen it. I, however, in my with my caseworker, I've seen a change in her lately for the better, which I don't know if she's acknowledging that maybe things were not all kosher in the beginning, but um, like I said, they all are mandated reporters. They are trained to think a certain way because they don't look at the bigger picture. They kind of just assume, you know, I some of them I think are intentionally biased, and some of them I don't think that they are. They just happen to be that way. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just I just don't know what to make of it sometimes.
Yeah. Maybe it's your work that's making them start to think twice about acting corruptly for your case.
Yeah, I know that they look at my page, my group. I don't really care because I haven't thought anything. I've felt the retaliation tactics from them at times, and I keep fighting back.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. They retaliate, my doll. But you're a brave woman. You're a hero for your kids and other kids.
Thank you. I don't feel
And
nice, but um, I just did what I felt was best.
you felt compelled too, right?
Yeah, because some people don't understand. They're like, I couldn't get rid of my kids. Well, it's not like I wanted to, but I didn't feel like I had any other alternative on being able to keep them safe mentally and physically. And so that was a really big decision we had to make. And it was very thought out before it happened because I just, they're your kids.
Yeah. Well, blessings to you, Mama. And thank you for coming on the show, sharing your story, letting people know what's happening out there. Hopefully, your presence here today will spare another family from making the mistake of thinking that someone's going to help that doesn't and fall into that trap. And hopefully, they are watching us and know that we're watching, and maybe they start to improve their behaviors and act less corruptly and think twice about it.
I hope so.
Thank you very much for coming on. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm kind of speechless, but thank you for having me on your show.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. And if you want to say the name of your Facebook group again, in case anyone wants to find you.
Sure, it's Oswego County Corruption.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and blessings to you and your family. And thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shauna.